Hey, my name's Mike. I'm a developer from Philadelphia, and in this video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about virtual environments with Pipenv in Python 3. So we're going to be covering the following key concepts. First, we'll take a look at what are virtual environments and why are they useful. And then we'll talk about installing Pipenv with both Windows and Mac. And we'll also talk about working with virtual environments. So I'll show you guys how to use Pipenv to do all sorts of cool stuff in Python. First, though, let's talk about what virtual environments are. So I want to pose a scenario to you guys. Imagine that you're working for a company, and with that company, you're working on a number of different projects. So let's say you're a Python developer, and maybe you're working on 2 or 3 different projects for this company. Now, a lot of times when you're working on different Python projects, those different Python projects are going to have different libraries that they use, and those different projects might use different versions of Python. So let's say that on one of the projects you're working on for your company, you're using Python version 2.7, but on another project, you're using Python version 3.7. And maybe on one project, you're using a specific version of a library, and on another project, you're using another specific version of a library. So let's come over here and take a look at 2 common libraries that are used in Python. The first one over here is the request library. So let's say that for this company that you work for, one of the projects you're working on uses request version 2.20.1. So you would have request version 2.20.1 installed on your computer, and that would be installed globally or just for your specific user. But this specific version of the request library would be installed on your computer. But let's say that for another project you're working on for your company, instead of using request version 2.20.1, instead they want to use one of these other versions like 2.18.2. Well, now you're in a situation where for the one project, you're using this version of the request library, and yet for another project that you're still working on your same computer, you're using one of these older versions of the request library. And believe it or not, this is actually a very common situation where you have multiple different Python projects that have different dependencies or different versions of libraries like requests. And in a situation like this, where for one project you need this version and for another project you need another version, it can be very difficult to manage and to maintain all these different versions and all these different things. And this gets even harder when you factor in multiple different libraries. So here we have another library, NumPy, and NumPy, the current version is 1.15.4. So maybe on one of your projects you're using this version, but then on another project that's on your same computer and your same setup and your same environment is using version 1.15.0. So the point is that you might have different projects that you're working on, and those different projects are using maybe different versions of Python, or they might be using different versions of different libraries. And in a lot of cases, they might be using different versions of the same library like NumPy or requests. Now, in a situation like this, like I said, it's very, very difficult to maintain all these different versions and to maintain all these different things on your actual computer, on the actual environment where you have Python installed. And so the way that Python developers have addressed this is using virtual environments. And a virtual environment is basically just an environment that is local to a specific project, which defines all the different versions of Python and the different versions of the different libraries and the different dependencies that you have for a specific project. So you can use a virtual environment, and in one directory for your one project, you might have request version 2.20.1, and yet in another directory, in a different virtual environment, you might be using request version 2.19.0 or some other version. And a virtual environment just allows you to keep all of this organized without you having to manually change the different versions and change the different files that you have for each of these on your own. And really, when you're working on multiple Python projects and you're working in a real production environment, you need to have something like virtual environments set up. So as we go forward in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set one of these virtual environments up, and I'll show you how to install different versions of the same packages and different directories and all sorts of cool stuff like that. But before we do that, we need to actually install what's called pipenv or pipenv. And this is a program which is going to allow us to create these virtual environments and to be able to do all of these cool things. So first I'm going to show you how to install and set this up on Mac, and then I'll show you how to do it on Windows. But first, let's set it up on Mac. So over here, I have a terminal open, and before we do this, you're going to need a couple things installed. So you're going to need Python 3 installed, and you're also going to need pip installed. And pip is the Python package manager. So pip is kind of what allows us to download and use all these different Python packages. So first, just check to make sure that you have pip. So you can say pip -- version, and this should tell you what version of pip that you have installed. So as long as you have pip installed and you have it for Python version 3, then we can go ahead and install pipenv. And pipenv is kind of like pip combined with virtual environments. So pip is a package manager. It allows us to manage all the dependencies that we have, and we can combine that with our virtual environment in order to be able to do some of the stuff I was talking about earlier. So to install this, we can just say pip install, and then I'm going to say -- user, and this is going to install it instead of on the global level, just on the user level. And this is what's recommended on the pipenv docs. And then you're going to say pipenv just like that. So I'm going to hit enter, and this should go off, and it should download pipenv and kind of set all of this up for us. Now you'll notice here that I'm getting this little warning text. It says the scripts pipenv and pipenv resolver are installed in this directory right here, which is not on path. Now, before we can actually use pipenv, we're going to add it to our path variable. Now, the path variable on OS X is basically just a system variable that stores the directories of executable files. Now, this pipenv and pipenv resolver are executable files that we have here on our Mac. And by putting this directory right here, where they're located, onto our path variable, it'll allow us to just type in pipenv so that we can use it. So right now, if I type in pipenv, you'll see it says the command is not found. And that's because when I type in pipenv, my operating system doesn't know what that means. But what I'm going to do is basically add this directory here onto my path variable, and then we'll be able to execute that. So the way that you can do that is first just copy this. So I'm going to right click and click copy. And now we're going to edit a file that we have on our Mac. So you're going to type in vi, and then you're going to type in a space and a tilde, a /, and then .bash_profile. Now, if you're not familiar with what VI is, this is kind of like a very, very basic text editor that we can use here on our Mac. So I'm going to hit enter, and you'll notice here that this little empty file thing opens up here. As long as you follow my instructions, you should be able to do this with no problem. I want you to click on the I key, and down here you'll see that it says insert. That means we can start typing. So now to add this to our path variable, I'm going to say export path is equal to, and open and close quotation marks, and now we're going to paste in that path that we just got. And then I'm going to type in a colon, and I'm going to type in a $ path in all capital letters. What this is going to do is it's going to append this onto our path variable. Now, it's very possible that if you've been kind of messing around in this file, or you've added other things to this file, that you'll already have this line right here where it's exporting stuff, in which case you can just put this in front of all the stuff that's already there with the colon after it. But otherwise, you can just do exactly what I have here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to type in escape, and you'll see down here that insert went away. Now you're going to type in a colon, W, Q, and then an exclamation point. And you'll see that that's all showing up down here at the bottom left. And now you're going to hit enter. So that's going to go ahead and save that file. Now, if you want, you can make sure that those changes got saved. You can type in more, and then you can type in a tilde / .bash profile, and this should show up there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to restart our terminal, and now our system's going to know where pipenv is located. So I'm going to close this terminal, we'll terminate, and then I'm going to reopen it, and now we should be able to type in pipenv. So I should be able to say pipenv -- version, and there we go. So now our system recognizes this pipenv executable. So that's how we do this on OS X. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set this up on Windows. If you have OS X, then you can just skip through the Windows section. So I'm here in my Windows environment, and I'm going to go ahead and install pipenv. So you're going to come down here into the search bar, and you're just going to type in CMD, and you're going to open up your command prompt. Now here's our command prompt. This is where we can type in all of our instructions. First thing we want to do is make sure that we have pip installed. We're going to use pip in order to install pipenv. So I'm just going to type in pip -- version, and this should pop up right here with the version of pip that you have installed, and it should be for Python 3. So once we've made sure that we have that installed, now you can go ahead and type in pip install -- user, and this is going to store it on the user level instead of on the global level. And now you're going to type in pipenv. So when you hit enter, this should go ahead and it should download pipenv, get all of that information and kind of set it up and install it on our machine. So you'll see here that we successfully installed it, but there's this warning text here. It says the scripts pipenvresolver.exe and pipenv.exe are installed in C, users, Mike D, and this whole big file path. And it's saying that this is not on path. Now path right here is actually a system variable that Windows uses in order to determine where the executables are. So what we need to do is we need to add this path here onto our path variable so that we can just type in pipenv like this and it'll automatically know to execute pipenv.exe. So if I hit enter here with pipenv, you'll see that it says pipenv is not recognized as a command. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. So what I want you guys to do is copy this path right here, and you can just come up here to the top left, click on this, go to edit, and then click copy. Now come on down here to the search bar, and I want you to start typing in environ, start typing in environment, and over here, this should pop up. It says edit the system environment variables. So you're going to click on this, and here you're going to click down here on this environment variables button, and then over here on path, you're going to click edit, and you're going to click new, and then here you're going to paste in that path that we just got. Now you're going to click OK. We're going to click OK down here, click OK a third time. Now we're going to restart our terminal. So you're just going to exit out of this, and we'll open up a new terminal. So here you're just going to type in cmd again, open up the command prompt, and now we're going to type in pipenv version. And this should now pop up with the current version of pipenv that we have installed. So that's going to do it for our Windows installation instructions. Now, the cool thing is now that we have this installed on Windows and on Mac, the instructions going forward are actually the same for both platforms. So I'm going to be continuing on the video in my OS X and my Mac platform, but if you're on Windows, you can do exactly the same thing that I'm doing. So let's start taking a look at how we can actually use this. And I'm actually going to head over here into my text editor. And the reason I'm in my text editor is because there's going to be some files that are going to get generated, and I want to be able to show you guys and point out some different things. Now in my text editor, I actually have a terminal down here on the bottom that I can use. You basically want to just get a setup so that you have your terminal, and then you also want to be able to view some files. So over here on the left, I have my file viewer, and I have the desktop folder open here, and I'm also open to the desktop directory in my terminal. So as long as you're on the same directory in your terminal as you have in your file system, now we're going to start creating some virtual environments. So I want to show you guys how we can take two different Python projects and we can manage the different dependencies and the environments for both of them. So let's create two directories, and I can do that over here. So I'm just going to say new folder, and we're going to call this project 1, and then we'll make another folder here in the desktop called project 2. Now from over here, I actually want to move into project 1. So I'm going to type in cd, and then I'm going to type in project 1. So now I'm in the project 1 directory. And it's very important that you're in the directory where you want to create your Python project. Now that we're in here, we're actually going to create our virtual environment using pipenv. So I'm going to say pipenv --3. And what this is going to do is it's going to initialize a Python virtual environment for Python 3. And that's what this 3 is. If you want to do this for Python 2, you can type in 2 here, but we're going to do it with Python 3. So now when I hit enter, it's going to go ahead and create these virtual environments. And you'll see down here in project 1 that I now have this pip file. So this pip file just got created, and this pip file is basically a file that has information about the virtual environment and about all the different packages and dependencies that I have in here. So down here you'll see it says this virtual environment requires Python version 3.7. And so this can actually be configured. So you could have one virtual environment that uses one version of Python, another that uses another version of Python. In our case, we have version 3.7 installed, so that's what shows up here. So now that we have our virtual environment initialized, I'll show you guys how we can start managing different libraries and different dependencies. So we're actually going to go ahead and install one of those libraries we were looking at before. So over here we have the request library. We also have the NumPy library. Why don't we go ahead and install NumPy? So here I'm going to say pipenv install, and now I'm going to say the name of the library. So we're going to install NumPy. So now when I hit enter, pipenv is going to go out and it's going to grab that package, and now it's going to update our virtual environment to indicate that it requires this package so that it's using this package. So now you'll see here, it says numpy is equal to star. And basically what that means is that this virtual environment supports any version of NumPy. So we can use any version of NumPy because when I was installing it, I didn't actually specify what version I was looking to use. And so as far as pipenv is concerned, we can use any version. You'll also notice that another file got created over here, this pipfile.lock file. And this pipfile.lock file is basically a file that specifies all of these specific versions of these different libraries. And it also just has some other useful information in here. And this pipfile.lock file is meant to be a file that pipenv itself is going to edit. So you don't want to actually manually edit this file. But if we look down here, you'll see that this is just kind of a bunch of code here. It's like this object sort of JSON-like code. And you'll see down here, if we scroll down, it says here numpy, and then down here we have our version. So because we didn't specify a specific version for numpy, you'll notice up here I just said pipenv install numpy. It's automatically going to say that we're going to use the latest version. And this is the latest version of NumPy. If we head over here, and here I'm just on this pypy.org website. You guys can come on here and look at these Python packages. I was just kind of using this to demonstrate how there's these different versions here. But you'll notice that the latest version of NumPy is 1.15.4, and that's what pipenv is determining that we're going to use. So by default, if you don't specify a version for the package that you want to install, pipenv is automatically going to use the latest version. But in our pip file, it's saying that we technically could use any version. We're not requiring a specific version. So now that we installed NumPy, I'm going to show you guys how we can install something else. So why don't we also install that requests library? So I'm going to say pipenv install request. But let's say that we want to install a specific version of requests. So here for NumPy, we said that we could use any version, and the pipfile.lock just automatically assumed that we were going to use the latest version. But let's say for requests, I want to use one of these lower number versions. Let's say I want to use version 2.18.1. Well, over here, I can actually specify that. So I could say pipenv install requests, and I could say double equals 2.18.1. And now when I hit enter, pipenv is actually going to go out and grab that exact version, and it's going to specify that as a dependency. So here, our pip file got updated. It says request equal to 2.18.1. So now this version of request is the only version that's going to be valid for this project. And then down here in pipfile.lock, you'll see that for requests down here, we have that exact version, which is now kind of locked in. So that's a way that we can specify an exact version for a specific library. So that's kind of cool. And one of the cool things now is that we have both of these sort of maintained in our virtual environment. So I don't have to install NumPy or requests globally at a specific version. They're installed here in my virtual environment, and I could easily switch over into another virtual environment that would use different versions of these two packages. And I'm going to show you guys how we can do that. So why don't we head over into project 2 over here. So I'm going to type in cd space / project 2. And this is going to bring me into the project 2 directory. So I'm now in the project 2 directory, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. So we can say pipenv, and we'll say 3. So this is going to initialize a virtual environment here. So you'll see we get our pip file. And now I'm going to install NumPy and requests, but I'll actually install different versions of them. So let's say we want pipenv, and we can say install, and now we'll get NumPy, but let's get NumPy at a specific version. So before we just had the latest, now we're going to get NumPy version 1.15.2. So NumPy 1.15.2, that's going to go ahead and install this. Okay, so we installed NumPy version 1.15.2, and if we look here, you can see in the pip file that that's right there. And then the same goes for the pipfile.lock. You can see here's NumPy. And now let's install requests again. So this time, instead of installing a specific version of requests, why don't we just do the latest version of requests. And so here you can see now we have requests. So we have these two projects, project 1 and project 2. And you can imagine that if you're working at a company, these might be two different Python projects that you're responsible for developing in. And instead of having to go off and configure your global Python environment maintain all these different versions every time that you switch between these projects. Now we have these virtual environments set up in order to do that. But the question is, how do we actually use these different versions, and how do we use this virtual environment? Well, in order to access it, we can use the pipenv shell. Now, right here in my terminal, this is my normal shell. So this is the shell that has my normal version of Python. It has the normal version of any of these libraries that I've installed globally on my machine. In order to access the shell for one of these specific virtual environments, though, we need to say pipenv shell, and this is going to go ahead and open up this shell right here. Now, this looks very similar to the normal terminal, and it acts pretty much the same way. Inside of here, though, we could say, for example, Python 3. And this is going to open up my Python 3 interpreter. And then in here, we can actually use these different dependencies, and we can operate inside of this virtual environment. So, for example, I could import NumPy, and then down here, I could say, let's print out NumPy, the version of NumPy. So you'll see here, inside of this virtual environment in project number 2, the version of NumPy was 1.15.2. Now, if you want to exit out of here, you can just type exit like this, and then you can hit enter, or actually we need to have open and close parentheses. And so we're back here in the pipenv shell, and to exit out of here, you can just say exit, just like that. You can also, to exit out of here, you can type in Control D, and that will exit you out just as well. So remember that we had version 1.15.2 in this local environment. Now if we go over to project 1, so I'm CDing over here into project 1, and now we'll run that same pipenv shell command. So now I have the shell open, and if I type in Python 3, then down here I can import NumPy from here. Now remember, in project 1, we are using the latest version of NumPy, which was specified here in the lock file, which is 1.15.4. So now if I print out NumPy version, you'll see that we get that version. So instead of 1.15.2, we have this version 1.15.4, and that's going to be the same for requests. So I can come over here and import requests, and then we can print that out, the version, and you see we get 2.18.1, which is what we have specified here in the lock file. And then if I was to exit out of here and to go back over into project 2 and run the shell command and then run Python 3, now if I did the same thing where I imported requests and I tried to print out the version, you'll see that we get version 2.20.1, and that's because that was the version that was specified here in project 2 for requests. You see that's down here. So hopefully you guys can see how this works, right? We can set up these virtual environments, and then within these virtual environments, we can actually access the shell, which is down here. And from that shell, we can execute our Python programs, or we can just use the Python interpreter, and that Python will execute in the environment that we set up. So all those Python files and everything will execute in that virtual environment. And the cool thing is that just by switching from project 1 to project 2, and by loading up the shell and sort of going into that virtual environment, that's all the work I have to do. I don't have to change any files. I don't have to re-download or change versions. I just go into the new project and everything is automatically set up for me. So that's one of the reasons why this is so useful. The other reason this is useful is because you can specify the environment, and then every developer that's working on the project can automatically have that same environment. So this pip file and this pipfile.lock, those can be uploaded into version control, or they can be sent to other developers. And as long as those developers have these files, they'll be able to have the same exact environment that you do when you're developing your Python programs. And that's why this is so useful. So that should give you guys a basic overview of how all of this stuff works. Hopefully it makes sense. These virtual environments are pretty simple to understand, but they're extremely powerful. So it allows us to customize and to maintain and to change our Python environments without actually having to do any configuration on our computer from, our global Python installation. So that's going to do it for me. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. From all of us here at Code Academy, I've been Mike, and happy coding.